I'm James Snyder. I have the privilege of being director of this museum. And you don't know how amazing it is night after night to have a full house in this room, always for different reasons, always a different crowd. And every time we hope that everyone leaves sort of full of happiness for having been with us. I think I don't have to question that about tonight because this will be a happy evening. It's really great. We know that all of you are, your connections are personal, I can tell. And we know that all of you are here because we have Trenton and we have KAWS and we have Dan Nadel from the Lucas Museum who's going to moderate a conversation between Trenton and KAWS, who are great buddies, and it's a pleasure to have them here. Some of you know me, some of you know that I often like to talk about the resonant connection of moments in time and serendipity and all kinds of stuff like that. And of course, Trenton is with us because of our exhibition, Draw Them In, Paint Them Out, which is Trenton in a different kind of conversation. In a conversation with Philip Guston, even though there's like 60 years between the times when they were being creative, each in their own right, and our show downstairs, if I can say so, is pretty amazing. Rebecca Shakin, our curator, is here. Will you stand up so everyone can just like applaud you? I mean, I don't know how many of you still read the New York Times, but for those of us who do, and if you've been in our art and museum world for a long time, to get a mention on the front page and then be the full front page of the art section plus a 2-page spread inside, that's 3 full pages. No one ever gets 3 full pages. And our exhibition did get that just as it opened. And you know, it's a point of pride in these times when most of what you read in the newspaper is not something that can make you cheerful and not something that connects you to the powerful potential of art and culture to take you to a brighter time ahead. So for us, it was very exciting to have that opportunity. And of course, you all know that KAWS has his own collection at the Drawing Center just now, the way I see it, and the resonant connection, not just about the friendship between Trenton and KAWS, but also the kind of resonant connection between what KAWS collects and what Trenton thinks about and what produces his art is also something really special. And so that makes this evening have that much more of a special feeling for me. In any case, I just have to, for me it's also always about serendipity. You all know that Trenton's show at James Cohan opened to coincide with our opening here at the museum. I managed to be there that night, and I was determined to take a picture of Trenton in front of one of the paintings where he and Torpedo Boy looked exactly alike, were standing in exactly the same position with the same expression on their faces. And I wasn't paying attention to who else was in the picture, who was talking to him, standing with him. And after I took it, and I was on my way home, and I was sending it to my wife, and I looked and I noticed that Trenton was in conversation with KAWS. Really, it's on my phone. After the talk, you can come up and I'll show you. And this is only in order to introduce Jenna Weiss, who has produced this evening, is going to get the evening underway, and then you'll have the opportunity to see Trenton and KAWS talking to each other, and it'll be much more interesting than just looking at my phone. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you for that introduction, James, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Weiss, and I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs here at the Jewish Museum. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation between Trenton Doyle Hancock and KAWS, moderated by Dan Nadel. This evening is presented in conjunction with the exhibition, Draw Them In, Paint Them Out, Trenton Doyle Hancock Confronts Philip Guston, which is on view through March 30th, so if you did not have a chance to visit the galleries tonight, please come back and do so. Before we begin, I also want to mention a number of upcoming events this season related to the exhibition, including a lecture by longtime civil rights strategist Eric Ward about the ties between anti-Semitism, racism, and white supremacy, which will take place here on Wednesday, February 5th at 6:30 p.m. And on Thursday, February 13th at 6:30 p.m., filmmaker Jem Cohen joins us for a screening of his 2023 short film, The Ballad of Philip Guston. For full details about all of our upcoming public programs and events, please visit our website to sign up for our e-news. And now I would like to briefly introduce our speakers. Trenton Doyle Hancock is a multifaceted artist whose work draws on the language of comics to challenge and comment on the American condition, notably the pernicious and persistent threat of racism, past and present. Raised in Paris, Texas, Hancock earned his BFA from Texas A&M University and his MFA from the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. In addition to his exhibition here at the Jewish Museum, his past projects include Color Flash for Chat and Chew, Paris, Texas in '72, Hancock's Monumental Tapestry Commission for the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and Mind of the Mound, Critical Mass at Mass MoCA in North Adams, Massachusetts. His retrospective Skin and Bones, 20 Years of Drawing, traveled from the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston to the Akron Art Museum, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art. KAWS engages audience beyond museums and galleries in which he regularly exhibits. His prolific body of work straddles the worlds of art and design to include paintings, murals, graphic and product design, and large-scale sculptures. Over the last 2.5 decades, he has built a successful career with work that consistently shows his formal agility as an artist, as well as his underlying wit, irreverence, and affection for our times. His current exhibition, The Way I See It, Selections from the KAWS Collection, is on view at the Drawing Center through this Sunday, January 19th. And finally, Dan Nadel is the Curator-at-Large for the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. His biography of Robert Crumb is forthcoming this April, and his other books include It's Life as I See It, Black Cartoonists in Chicago, 1940 to 1980, Peter Saul, Professional Artist Correspondence, 1945 to 1976, and the collected Harry Hu publications. Nadel has curated exhibitions for galleries and museums, including the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago and the Whitney Museum of American Art, and organized monographic exhibitions on artists including Mike Henderson, Kathy Butterly, William T. Wiley, and Mary Heilman. Now, if you could please take a moment to silence your cell phones and join me in welcoming Trenton Doyle Hancock, KAWS, and Dan Nadel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. It's good to see you all tonight. I was saying to Trent when we started that we should at least acknowledge the great David Lynch, who passed away today. So, thank you, David, for everything. But I want to start, and I'm lucky enough to be here. I was thinking about it on the way here that David Lynch was a uniquely generous artist in the sense of both what he gave us in the work, but also the things he produced, his weather reports, all that sort of stuff. And I'm lucky enough to be here with two other extremely generous artists in the sense of what they've introduced us to, how they communicate with us, and the two shows that are under discussion right now. Both these guys were very busy this fall. Brian opened his collection show at the Drawing Center and also a wonderful painting show at Scarstead. And Trent opened the show downstairs and an incredible painting show at James Cohan Gallery. But I wanted to talk about the two shows that put you in dialogue with other artists. And both of them, you're both really exposing yourselves in a way that I was kind of fascinated by. You're putting your work and your sensibilities in dialogue with other artists. And Trent, I wanted to start with you. Like, is it as productive as it is scary to put yourself, right up against Guston like that. And Brian, and both of you have this. The encounter with Guston for you kind of reframes both of you. It reframes Guston, it reframes you. And Brian, I wondered, for you, it's such a public kind of exposure. And I wondered if you felt a little naked of showing people both what you love, how you absorb art, just, recreating the studio wall, and also showing your obsessions to the audience, which both of you have done quite a bit. So just wondered how that felt. You can start, Trent.
Well, I'm still pinching myself because it's sort of, it's a dream to be, on the walls with an artist that you consider, a mentor from beyond. It's like he's always sort of omnipresent in my studio, and to have this kind of opportunity has been absolutely wonderful. But I have to, peeling back a little bit to, late 90s, early 2000s, and I started, people started talking about the work, and it's not just me in the studio any longer. It's, here's a review here or whatever. His name would come up often, right? And at first there was a novelty to that, and then, sort of like, okay, what is this? What is the real relationship? Are people actually making the right correlation between us? And so I started to pull back a little bit, but then, I start doing tours of the Guston retrospective as it was in Fort Worth and things like that. So it's like I'm asking for the dialogue, but in some ways I'm also pulling away from it. So it was this kind of, it became a contentious thing for a little while in the studio. But
just how does that manifest, like contentious in the studio, in what way? We fight for authorship. We fight for a voice. You and the ghost, or just you?
It's the artist, yeah. And Guston talked about this. It's the idea of having a pantheon of greats, which then they are ghosts themselves, that you have to in some ways exercise, or at the very least contend with. And so you come around 2014 or whatever, I decided to take on Guston head on. It was more of a confrontational thing where it's very explicit, whereas before you could kind of read between the lines and see, through the color or the form that he was there, but it's a there, not there kind of thing. But I think at some point I wanted to really make that a manifest thing and say, no, I think I need to really publicly deal with this thing.
And this show aside, when you started publicly dealing with it, what was the response? Did it surprise you? Was there pushback? Also, and did you start to kind of hate the dialogue?
It was not a love or hate thing. It came out of an obligation to something that was greater than what was happening in my life or my studio, because it was about my mother, about my grandmother. It was about civil rights. It was about something so much larger. To have this just as a kind of a prism to kind of look into this other publicly political space that I had not really so much been a part of.
Right.
You waiting for me?
I'm waiting for you. Just me. It's okay.
It's funny you say putting yourself out there, exposing yourself, feeling naked. I didn't really think of it.
Maybe I'm projecting.
Yeah, possibly. It's a different thing to be able to show. I'm so used to taking my work and putting it out in the world, and to do an exhibition of other artists. I think my only concern was, would the artist approve of the hang, or would the artist approve of the context or the proximity to a different artist? That doesn't really happen in my house because I don't ever have anyone come over. But putting it in the drawing center, then suddenly I became conscious. In my mind, these are things that have, this sort of dialogue between pictures has made sense for years, and it's existed in my studio, in my house, and then suddenly putting it in the public was kind of like, it was a little strange, but at the same time, it's also like I can get behind it in a way that I don't usually get behind my own work with promoting it or pushing it or getting people to go see it, or, you know, I feel like it's outside of me, so I could really push.
It's outside of you, but it's so reflective of who you are. I mean, in some ways, that show felt to me like, oh, I'm learning a lot about this person in a way that your paintings sort of are almost not as personal and revealing in a funny way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because of Instagram, I share so much on it with putting artists on there that it's a natural sort of thing. So in my mind, the associations and the sort of sharing is already in existence. This is just the first physical space that we've invited people to see stuff.
And did it change the way you were making paintings? I mean, because you were working on a show while this show was up. I mean, it must have been a very strange experience.
I don't think it really changed the way I was making paintings. In anything, it made me realize that, like, I have a lot of stuff. And, like, maybe I don't need another of this purse or this thing. Like, you know, because a lot of times, like, I'll collect and I'll hang certain things and other things I might not. And then, but then having to, like, sit and edit to fit a space was a problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that you felt overwhelmed by how much?
Yeah, like I lose sleep about artists that didn't fit in there that I collect heavy, you know, and that would be perfect in the show. I had to have another room.
Because they didn't fit into the narrative you were telling, or
No, just the physical
space.
I mean, you could see it's like the heaviest hang probably in the city, but
but weirdly, it still feels kind of airy in there. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a heavy hang. I mean, both of what both of you have been up to. I mean, what's interesting is that, I mean, Trenton, we've talked for years about He-Man and Star Wars and the Garbage Pail Kids and all these sort of things. And I mean, both of you are so engaged with all sorts of things that are not normally in art museums. So I wondered if you thought that, you know, Brian, your show, and Trent, your own collecting impulses. And on the one hand, I wondered, Trent, if you were a little jealous of Brian getting to do that kind of show. Like, do you have ambitions to show your stuff in that way? And two, just, you know, how hard do you all feel like you need to push to get everything in dialogue with each other, in the sense of sort of demolishing high-low boundaries? Why not?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, jealousy doesn't figure into it, but it's like to see this kind of presentation and your generosity of, you know, putting that out there and saying, you know, being very transparent about what you have is like a very beautiful thing. And to have it, you know, be the drawing center, it's like, okay, yeah, a lot of people are going to be able to come in and get this greater understanding of you, those artists, you know, but, you know, like you were saying, the term reframed is applicable there. And I think with, my Mass Mocha show, that might have been my first very kind of large-scale attempt to kind of show what's behind the scenes, what's the resource behind the imagery, and to, make that case for the eradication of the high and the low, and to kind of flatten that out a little bit. You know, to have a museum show that has paintings in it, but is also sort of a theme park, and that, you know, that was kind of an exciting thing, and kind of a step forward for me, just saying, here's my worldview in terms of, you know, art making. This is what I'm trying to promote.
The question.
The old high-low conundrum.
Yeah. No, I wasn't set on, you know, like, the show just started. It was a growth of kind of the stuff I collect and how I look at things. I wasn't saying like planting a flag about this is like to break down barriers, and this is just like what I think is great. And it's funny seeing all the press that's come out about it. It really seems like that was like a strategic thing, but in my mind I look at this stuff with the same sort of, I think the benefit of I love the Drawing Center, and the benefit of having it there is that it made me just focus with works on paper, and that kind of like put a level playing field of just like really understanding the different marks made over time through different individuals of all different places.
I mean, but it's funny. I mean, both of you, though, I mean, intentional or not, I mean, you're charting art histories that, some of us have sort of dreamt of for years, and so you're sort of enacting them in real time and in real space. And it is a larger vision of art than we see in most institutions or collections, for that matter. But it's good that you can kind of seize on your impulses and realize them in a way. I mean, did you ever struggle with that, Trent? Just the idea of sort of mixing these things like you have? I mean, it doesn't seem like it in all the years I've known you.
No, I mean, as you know, like we were doing, during the picture box years, it's like make a garbage pail kid. And, no one was kind of doing that back then. It's like kind of riffing on something that was already riffing on things. It's like, okay, this is the next step, is to insert myself into the culture in a way. It's like make a Marvel handbook, right? That is, but it's all my characters instead.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing seemed right to me, and it was like, well, instead of just a normal show catalog, why not start putting other kinds of documents out into the circulation that, kind of start to talk about this, like I said, this kind of breakdown of, like, I think you were the same, like in the sense that it's like my toy collection at home, like I look at that and I'm,
oh God.
And I look at my paintings and go, well, the toys are better than the paintings. Like, I got to bridge that gap somehow.
Yeah, so you got to make your own toys.
Well, yeah.
Where have you been?
Yeah,
what's that?
like,
So where have you been?
Yeah.
Have you not,
Buried.
I remember you talking to me when you were first making toys. You reached out.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, I see those kind of objects as just a very accessible way of like occupying a space with people. And, those objects when I was younger meant so much to me. That you bring something into your space, it's there, it's physical, it's the same size as anything else. And, I want to make stuff in a good way that can exist like that, and doesn't need to be like, this is a painting, this is a drawing, this is serious, think about this.
Can I? Yeah. I was like, I'm breaking the chain.
Move back
like,
further.
It's like my brother and I, like David, my brother right there, Mr. Designer. We grew up, and toys was our museum. So it's like our bedroom was like He-Man is like every character, and we'd set up the castles and everything. But we also kept the toy packaging, and studied.
Even as a kid.
As a kid, we
Oh,
kept
yeah.
the packaging, or at least cut out the logos and the paintings on there, and studied those things. And it's like, there's something about quality that we were trained to understand through like industrial design, through logo design, through package design, through all of that stuff. And we kind of came to this understanding that was art at back in the mid 80s. And you kind of carry that on with you. And I just want to throw that at you. Like, was there something similar, like, that you were kind of studying that kind of led you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when I first started making toys in like '99 was the first one. I was conscious of like how these things existed in my life. These enterprises, say Star Wars, and how there's movie, but then there's these objects that you get to take into your space. And I think of those toys that I make as, there's this world, there's this public, sort of world I've created, but then there's these intimate pieces that are small and can have a place with you. So I think I've always been very conscious of like how those things can sort of travel and navigate so much easier than say like an edition or something more formally presented.
Did you have an experience like Trent with toy packaging or comic books? Or I mean, when Trent just said that, it resonated with me because I feel like that's how I got my training, is to like how to look at something and discern quality, all from deciding what was the best issue of the X-Men or something. I mean, it was just the thing.
No, definitely. I mean, and also skating and just the skateboard graphics and kind of understanding that all these things are made by individuals is really, I think you turn a corner at a certain age where you think everything just lands from the sky and, exists. And then you start to realize, oh no, these are individuals. Like I like these 3 graphics because it was done by the same person. And so once you start to go down those rabbit holes, you start to almost get empowered into being able to make things and put them out.
So just a fun question. What's the most recent thing each of you has been completely obsessed by and bid on eBay or some other degenerate website, and why?
Well,
I mean, I could tell you mine, but I won't. It's depressing.
well, you have to now. Toy catalogs, like vintage, like dating all the way back to the 40s.
American?
No, all over the world. And so for
Excuse
about a
me.
year, I was probably beating out everybody on eBay to buy toy catalogs. So I amassed probably 1,000 of them. And
Nice.
but it's just so I could have this encyclopedic understanding of, we all know the Fisher-Price toy telephone with the googly eyes, and you drag it, but when something's popular, like every other company starts aping that thing, and so I was like, oh, there's this company in China, there's a company in Germany, there's like a company that are making their version of this very popular, like googly-eyed phone. And so to kind of trace this etymology of form and like function and like weirdness through history and across the world has been really a great journey, and that kind of thing helps me. I don't know how it helps me, but it helps me.
Yeah. It's research. Just tell yourself that. That's what I do.
The IRS knows it's research.
Yes, of course. Naturally.
I'm taking the 5th.
Oh, come on.
I mean, come on, it's not thousands of toy catalogs. But I think definitely the Drawing Center, working on the Drawing Center for the last year or 2 has helped me like take a pause and process, even though I do collect weekly, but I've been...
You're cool in it.
Not really, no. I
You
tell
just won't
myself, I
tell
tell
me.
my accountant I am.
It's just me and you up here.
Tell my
It's
studio
fine.
I am, but...
All right. Both of you have been very impacted by comics. I mean, Trent, you in the catalog have an interview with Art Spiegelman about your encounter with Raw. You're also a Crumb fan, and Brian, I know you have Crumb in the Drawing Center exhibition, and also it's very impactful on you. So I wanted to start, Trent, if you could talk a little bit about your encounter with Raw, how that kind of liberated you in a way. And I don't know, Brian, if you ever were into Raw or not. And then maybe we'll talk about Crumb for a minute.
So my first encounter with Raw magazine was probably early 90s, mid 94-ish. And I was in undergrad, and I was working on, trying to find myself graphically and everything. And I was roommates with a grad student who was in the literature department, and he had, some of these, and he's like, you might like these. And so he handed me specifically that one that's there, the later one, the Raw with the red banner at the
With
top.
the Crumb cover. That was
Yeah.
my first issue, actually.
Was it? Yeah.
My mom bought it for me.
Yeah.
At Politics and Prose. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was such a revelation because it, kind of flattened things out in the sense that It's like, okay, here are these short form, like, who was popular at the time? I think Chris Ware, he was just sort of coming up at the time, and obviously Crumb, and a few others that were recognizable. Art has a piece in it, excerpts from Mouse. So I was kind of getting this drive-by version of what was out there, and kind of graduating from superhero comics to this more underground things that were more probing in political ways, and sexual, and all kinds of, they were explorations. And so that was exciting. But the other thing that was really cool was there were paintings in there. It's like Sherry Samba, or Darger. It's like the first time I saw Darger.
That was the first time a lot of people
was in
saw
Rome.
Darger, I think. Yeah.
And so I was getting this education that I deemed like an alternate education, through the magazine, which was like very cool.
I mean, I wasn't really into, I appreciate Raw and
Yeah.
seeing covers like Gary Panther.
Yeah.
I mean, that cover is it's like this iconic image burned. But I think with Crumb, I was more just interested in this individual, like doing these incredible drawings and having them be so like autobiographical and personal that, I don't know, it just struck a chord that didn't seem like comic book. It just seemed more like personality sharing, and that's kind of more what I would gravitate towards.
What's interesting about Raw, like you said, is that it opened up, I think for a lot of artists, it opened up the possibility that they could make narrative, they could make it comics or sequential pages or whatever, and it sort of offered this in a sophisticated package. And you were telling stories from the jump, as far as I can tell.
You mean, just
in your work.
early on? Yeah, because growing up in Paris, Texas, there wasn't any other. I mean, there were bluebonnet paintings, cows, and comics. And so, obviously I'm like looking at these things like it's man, you can just escape and like go into this world, but also see some sort of a long-term plan. It's like, oh, this is something I can do with I'm not going to stop drawing, and here's an avenue that I can like see legs like beyond this town. And so yeah, I just dove right in and began to articulate myself that way. And so I thought that's what I was going to do, like get my portfolio, go to Marvel Comics or Image Comics at the time, and pitch my case. But what ended up happening was, going to school and just learning about the other kind of ways art history has broken down and what was possible. And so the comic thing never left. It was just like working for the school paper, doing as the illustrator and doing comics for like 4 or 5 years. And that just sort of segued into the painting language. Yeah.
Brian, I wondered what you thought about comics and cartooning in terms of your own work. I mean, you told me once that Crumb inspired you to pick up a rapidograph, so that's not nothing.
No, definitely not. I mean, there's definitely, in looking at artists like Basil Wolverton and just seeing that level of craftsmanship, it seems unattainable. But in general, I think, I don't know, I like sort of more commercial characters. Like I like looking at forms like the Smurfs and how those existed. And, I remember having all those little toys and just sort of like this set of basic characters reiterated in all these different ways. That kind of stuff kind of kept me more interested.
Yeah. Before we get into characters, which we're going to do.
Did I jump the gun?
And what?
Did I jump the gun?
No. I wanted to ask Trent, I mean, there's always been this mystery about the simultaneity of Crumb and Guston's embrace of the kind of big shoe, rubber band, down and dirty cartoon style. publicly at least, Crumb is first in 1967, but there's no way of knowing exactly what. I mean, my theory is it's a cosmic coincidence. They were drawing from the same great cartooning well of the Depression era.
Yeah, like Harriman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they pulled some of those kind of goofy, baggy-legged forms out of that language, and, they grew up on it, so it makes sense. But I know that you and Art have been trying to find that thing that... Where is Art? He's got to be here.
He's been sleuthing on this for years.
There you are. So, I mean, I think you guys have a little bit more scholarship on that. But thinking of Guston as this kind of anchor for painting, and there's others that are maybe not as well known. They're kind of satelliting around. I think a lot about Domenico Noli.
Oh, yeah.
And just the way, Italian painter who died really young in 1970, and did Guston know about Noli and vice versa? And because I know that Noli was creating those kind of bulbous, close-up, very enigmatic forms, and of course, Guston's attachment to Italy and all things Italian.
Well, and Noli also was a prolific illustrator, so
right.
it was in circulation all through the 60s, which is interesting.
Yeah. And
I also think about Ramberg and Noli.
Okay.
If you look at that vision of hair or just the sort of centralized body part, there's a lot of coincidence, whatever, resonances.
But yeah, I think that's a conversation that I'm maybe more interested. I think the Crumb thing is like, okay,
Are you a Dominic Noli guy?
I don't own any, sadly.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's incredible. I love finding those sort of things, those mysteries. I mean, I sent you that picture of Louis Wayne sculptures from the 20s that I own that have this like perfect existence with Carl Worsum's 70s sculptures.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's interesting how things can be in the air and you wonder what is recognized, like the Harry Hu and Tadano Ryoko doing these very similar paintings, like Carl 60s women and Tadano Ryoko's like 60 pink women paintings. And you just know there's no internet. What are the chances of influence?
Yeah. Or are they just looking at the same things, which is very possible.
I would feel very weird to not mention Peter Saul and his work and who is aware of that, because that started in
Peter's
60.
story.
Yeah, he'll just scream out 9 years earlier.
Oh no, well, Peter Saul, great American painter, hero to all of us. Peter Saul made very cartoony, expressionist paintings starting in about 1960, and he had shows here at the Frumkin Gallery. And he told me that he got a call at some point from Frumkin that Franz Klein and Philip Guston had been to see the show in like 1963 in New York. I mean, that's a long germination period, like 1963 to Guston in 67. But he swears by that story. I mean, there's no reason to doubt him. It doesn't mean that, it's the genesis of it all, but it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I feel like history is constantly being rewritten when, people become more and more aware of how these things
And
go. Somebody
somebody like Louis Wayne Louis Wayne, the great mad cat painter. Any of you? Wain. Go Google him. He was widely in circulation because those images were used as evidence of mental illness, right?
Well, no, he did all those greeting cards.
And
He
the greeting, yeah,
did
but I mean in
greeting cards,
America,
calendars,
yeah.
and everything, and then slowly they kind of took this direction of more and more sort of psychedelic, deranged almost.
And it's the kind of stuff
But
that
the early stuff, those sculptures are from the 20s, which is when he was like very prolific, very professional as an artist.
yeah,
And I don't know, they're fascinating.
yeah, they really are amazing. So now back to characters. Now we can talk about characters. Both of you and Gustin, of course, have created stand-ins for yourselves and also sort of cast of characters. Trent, you're the only one of you three that has been explicitly narrative. I mean, Brian, you make narrative work, but without necessarily like plot and advancing dilemmas. So I wondered about the impulse to create these continuing characters. I mean, you guys have been working with this cast for decades now, and it keeps evolving and keeps getting richer and richer, and you're introducing new ones as well sometimes. So I just wondered about that impulse, about that thing that makes you want to do that, and also how it is. I mean, we're all men of a certain age now. How it is to sort of grow older, I'm not going to say old, older with these things you created when you were a kid, basically. It's over to you, Brian. You have to go first this time.
Honestly, I mean, I see that in so many artists, and definitely people will laugh when I say it, but when I look at like Giacometti, I think that that's his characters. That's just but like I feel like mine are like in cartoon form, so they tend to be associated with animation or something with a narrative, which they don't have. I think for me, I build the narratives on the sort of settings I put them in, the architecture I put them next to, and just kind of how I carry them through with me in my life. But as far as thought bubbles and actual words coming, I've never done that.
Have you ever been tempted? Did you ever play around with it in a sketchbook?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I just I feel like their existence, their presence is sort of what's the story.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like for me that's more than I can add with words.
And how is it? I mean, you have kids now.
We're getting old together. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do. Yeah, it's funny. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and I finally have justification for the aesthetic of my home.
You didn't need that.
Yeah. But it is interesting because when I first did the first companion toy, there was no intention to have this long-lasting character with me. I didn't. I thought I was always interested in sculpture, and I didn't know how to make sculpture when I was, I always had this like thought like, oh, you would need a patron to commission this. And then I found, through my friends in Japan that they were making these small editions of toy sculptures. And so instead of making this monumental thing from the start, I made a few hundred of this small thing that I could put on consignment to the new museum and different places, and having no idea that would lead to like me 20 years later, 25 years later.
So the whole character thing, I think, as I was saying, comics was my entry point into this, and comics and video games were my entry point into this idea of world building, which I sort of sidelined for a little while, from a small kid up to maybe later as an undergraduate, where I resurrected all that stuff. So creating the character Torpedo Boy when I was 10 years old. So I was like, whatever, 84, 85. And then him kind of going on ice for a while, but then coming back after I understood that painting was this place that I wanted to be and, could have a life. And so he started to appear there. And kind of bringing that cartoon energy with him. So this idea of a narrative, maybe not so explicitly at the time, but started to get there. And then, before you know it, you've created another character or a group of characters, and they were all autonomous for a while. They just worked in separate things. And then graduating from grad school and moving to Houston, it's like I was able to kind of unpack a lot of things. And one of the things was like, throw all these characters out in front of me. And so then there was this possibility of narration that I thought was very exciting, and also kind of punk, really, because it's not something I was necessarily seeing, like the explicitness of it. And like to kind of have my debut here in New York, and it's like open a show and people walk in, and I've spent 2 days writing all of the narrative on the wall, and because that's the thing you're not supposed to do. A, no one wants to read all that shit, and B, it's so juvenile, It's like, but it's juvenile by design, and that's what I wanted, out of that kind of. I wanted to see that, and that's how I wanted to kind of put myself out there. But also, it's like this, coming from a school like Tyler School of Art, there's this entrenchment in the history of painting, especially, starting with modernism, dating all the way back to, Giotto, and we're talking about the linkage between all of these things. And I'm like, well, what do I have to give? And I think painting for me at the time was a way for me to plug in all of these things that I'd been kind of working on separately for a long time into this one form, and to say, okay, this is what I have to offer. This is what's going to kind of connect backwards through history. And so yeah, that was, character was also performative. It's like I'm performing literally as these characters, and then so it's the world, it's an environment, and I think you have the same thing. It's like there's a sculpture, there's something to kind of anchor a space that people can fall under the shadow of, but then there's these pictures that you can kind of fall into that are on the wall, but then there's something people can take home and like put under, next to their pillow, or it is a pillow, or it's like, like I love that idea of world building, but in that way, not just saying it, not just lip service, but let's build a world. That's really an exciting thing.
No, I mean, I would agree. Like for me, it's always been important to kind of have things out in the world, not just design it for the white space, but also have it exist within the larger market. Like if I did a cereal box, it's, it's out there. It's out there first, and then I did the painting. I don't know. I feel like the gallery is only like a small portion of my outlet, and I'm kind of conscious of how things disseminate in all ways.
I'm also just curious about, you guys, with the characters, you also have this history that you've now accumulated for 25 years of these characters. Trent, you have an elaborate sort of narrative structure. And Brian, you have all these, it's funny what you said about the presence is the narrative. And that's that's a really profound thing to say. It's giving these things, letting them just be and kind of influence the zone around them, is another way of creating a narrative, because it's sort of putting the onus on the viewer in some way. I wondered about that with you, like how you think these characters are impacting other people.
It's not really, I don't know. I hope they're impacting someone, but for me, I feel the need to make them and put them out there, and
Yeah.
I'm lucky in that I've had opportunities to do these projects, and like I enjoy doing large outdoor projects in countries that are new to me, or like a whole sort of community that I'm entering into through my work. I think that's like a powerful thing that art allows you.
Something interesting also that both of you are talking about, sort of world building, or in your case, sort of entering into a new community and experiencing something. And are you both, does that allow you a certain amount of optimism, both of you? In the sense that you're creating something that other people will inhabit?
I've always been naively super optimistic.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know. It's the way I
Yeah.
stumble around and make it work.
Yeah.
I think I have to fight to maintain my optimism sometimes. It's just, but I do err towards that, but it's totally tempered by, the the draggings of the world, I guess, if you will. But I think art, and it's like the luxury of making art, like to be in a country that has allowed me and others to do that, and has created a space to do that and to exist that way. That's a very exciting thing that I'm thankful for. There's an optimism that's there. The other thing is, there's those times in the studio, and maybe all artists have them, I don't know, but where you're just at a low point. You're just low, and it's maybe for no other reason than something's off, just kind of brain-wise. It's like everything could be going right, but then you're low, and then there's either music or art or something else that you look at and you ruminate on it for a second, and it brings you back. And to me, that is evidence that there's something in art that is a fulfillment of the spirit. And for me, that's a kind of optimism that I know that, well, this isn't just a luxury item that we could all throw it in a landfill and it wouldn't matter. It's like, no, this stuff is why museums exist. It's why these spaces that value and protect art exist. And so I'm like, oh yeah, these are kinds of churches. They're kinds of almost in some ways religious. There's a religiosity, I think, that's attached to just the idea that you can make something that is going to move the dial of the spirit in some way. And like that's a very optimistic thing, I think, in a place to be.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, we can clap. That's fine. That'll put some wind in your sails. On that note, I wanted to ask. I mean, you both make art that really wants to communicate, that wants people to see it, that wants people to, as you both have said, take it home in one form or another, that wants to be in the world. And Trent, you've just talked about sort of what art can do. It can inspire, it can heal, it can sort of turn the dial, it can be religious. The other thing, in recent years, and particularly, I mean, we'd be remiss not to mention it, in recent years, of course, there's the idea that art can hurt, and that goes to sort of the postponement of the Guston exhibition a few years ago. So I wondered, do either of you think that's true? If it can be positive, can art hurt? And sort of more particularly, like, do we need to worry about the hooded figures downstairs? Is it actually potentially a thing, or is art mostly a positive? Yeah, Brian, come on,
Nobody
just
wants
take
to
it
go
on,
near that
dude.
one.
Yeah.
I do think people have the option to what their intake is, and people will gravitate and gain from certain situations or certain experiences with artwork in the ways that they do, depending on their histories and kind of what brought them to that moment in their life. So in that sense, if it's something that can stimulate a conversation, and I think if you're open to it, I find it, should be beneficial. But I'm sure there are ways to offend and hurt, and I think that's all part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming from like a Taoist standpoint, it's, you can't have one thing without the other thing. So I think the hurt is laced into any good art, like it's in there, because it takes into account that we're all individual beings with our own perspectives, and that you're going to come to an art with, with that kind of projection onto it. So I think to say an art hurts or it can't or doesn't hurt is like, what is that? But to the point of the hoods and do we have to worry about them? I think Guston's paintings are fixed. Like, we don't have to worry about his, because that was something that that's something psychological that he was trying to work through himself. And he did. He got to the other side of those pictures and then started painting other things. So there was a kind of finite quality to that. And so that can be studied. But then there's, the circumstance around, there's the environment, there's the other things that affect the art that aren't the art. Those are the, those are the hoods we have to worry about. There's the ones that are, in office and can, affect change in ways that you don't know. You don't know what crazy's gonna do. It's unpredictable.
That's true. I was going to try to say something unpredictable, but I couldn't think of anything.
I appreciate the pause.
Yeah. Thought maybe Brian might jump in and do something. Well, okay. It's been about an hour. People are getting restless, I'm sure. They want to have dinner or popcorn. These guys will be around afterwards if you want to chat for a minute. I'm going to run away. But thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. Have a good night.